Here we are with Al Ovrom, who is running for the upcoming election, Coronado City Council. Al, tell us about yourself. What's your Coronado story?
Well, it actually begins back in San Diego when I was born over there in Mercy Hospital because my dad was in the Navy and spent about half of my life growing up here in San Diego, the other half somewhere else. Finally, my family moved here. My dad moved here in 1951 and allowed me to start off in high school here and went from here to the Naval Academy and then off into the Navy for 20 years before I came back. On the positive side, that was the greatest move we ever made, was coming back. So we've enjoyed living here, being a part of the community. Son John, his wife, 2 boys are here, so we've actually had 4 generations here in Coronado. So have a pretty good history and a pretty good knowledge of what's been going on here for a long time and how things have changed over the years. Been on the school board for 8 years, planning commission for 2 years, city council previously for 4 years, and then in the interim I was on the tunnel commission and on a committee for the school board, and then came back on the council in 2006. So I'm running for re-election this year.
Okay, and why is running for city council important to you?
Well, as I told you earlier, I would have left the to you off of the end of the question. I don't think it's important. It's mostly, I think, a question of why is it important for people to run for city council? And I think you can see it in the Bell case and other places where if citizenry doesn't take a very, very active part in what's going on, bad things can happen. Fortunately, my experience over the years here in Coronado has been that the people who have been on the council have been good people, wide diversity of backgrounds, and bring a lot to the council and try very, very hard to, for the most part, to try very hard not to put their personal agenda in there, but try to work together to come up with things that are good for the community as a whole. And so I think that's why it's good that people run for the city council. Got a number of people who say I'm glad I do it rather than they do it. But it's a labor of love. I've been here a long time and really appreciate the fact that I grew up here. My family's grown up here. My grandchildren are growing up here, and I think that's important, and that's why I do it.
And what qualifies you to be on city council?
Well, I hear that going on. I hear that going on at every level. What qualifies someone to be there? I think what qualifies you is primarily interest and a desire to serve. You know, if you don't have the interest and you don't have the desire to serve, then you don't belong on the city council. You don't belong in any elected body. And I think the people can sense that. They sense when you're sincere and when you're not. I've had a number of people over the years who've said, I don't always agree with you, but at least I know where you stand, and I appreciate the fact that you try to take up both sides and see what both sides are before you go off and put a vote on things. And it's always interesting. I've not always been on the winning side. I've been on the losing side. I've been on the winning side. But when it's all said and done, I appreciate the fact that my compatriots on the council over the years and on the school board before that were willing to have really good, hearty discussions of the pros and cons and try to come up with what we all thought was the best for the community. And as I say, sometimes I'm on the agreeable side, sometimes I'm not. But in any case, once the decision is made, then the decision is made and we go on to do new things. So that's what's so important to me.
What are the top 3 issues that Coronado faces today, and how will you work at solving them?
Well, obviously, the one we talk about a couple of them, but the one we don't talk about, I think, is the long-term fiscal viability of the city. As most people probably know, we've, over the years, and this goes back for as long as I can remember, we budgeted a surplus, and the city has gotten more money in and spent less money, so we've collected a rather large reserve for the general fund. It's, matter of fact, it's equal to our annual budget. It's rough. Our annual budget is roughly 37 million, and our reserve is 37 million. And that came through dedicated efforts of councils over a long period of time. But as you look at where we're going, one with the state, and that's the one elephant in the room, the state, and how they managed to take money away from us and have for a long period of time because they refused to do their own job of balancing their budget. We have some long-term projections because of a number of things. One of them, part of it is buying the hospital out over 15 years, but that's not the bigger issue for me. The bigger issue for me, you read it in the newspapers all the time, has to do with pensions and healthcare costs and where they're taking us. And that's a concern of mine. I'm not saying that we are in bad shape this minute, but I think if you look out over an extended period of time, we will probably need to do something very, very different. The City Manager Association of San Diego suggested a couple of things, including a two-tiered system and changing how people earn their rights, investment rights for retirement. And I think we need to look at those and get into those, because if we don't, it's one of the big elephants in the room. It's probably the other big elephant, other than the state taking money away from us. So that's on my side, one of the big ones. The other big one, obviously, is traffic, and from a traffic point of view, I think we all know we had the town hall meeting the other evening. I thought it went very, very well. It was well attended, 130 plus people, a lot of comments, a lot of good comments. Received an interesting letter from Tom Brady yesterday. The whole council did, and he boiled it down. I thought, to some pretty basic elements. We can work around the periphery, we can work on things, but the one that really counts, and he said it very clearly, is the getting the cars off the streets. And that's the hard one. It's always been the hard one. It will continue to be the hard one. We're going to work with the Navy. We're going to work with the Metropolitan Transit System, of which I'm a member. All of those kinds of things, whether the ferry service, you name it, we need the support of the people in San Diego to do that. I work with them all of the time, Sandag, MTS, and other places. But we're all under the gun financially, so the financial end of the tail is really wagging us right now. But that doesn't mean we don't go out and we don't plan. We need to plan. We need to get whole coalitions together to try to solve this bigger picture problem. So that's a bigger picture thing. That's one of the issues. The rest of them, I think, probably fall into things that help the citizens. We have particularly the way that the community is growing and changing. There's good parts of that, and there's bad. The good part of it, perhaps we hope, it is the theater. That will change the downtown. The RISIP group has been working very, very hard on trying to take a look at the standards we changed a few years ago, see if we can change those again. So it's a combination of weighing property rights and other rights and trying to work out the necessary changes, but in a way that doesn't tip the iceberg too far any particular way. Historical properties are always of interest, and they need to be balanced against other things. So what I do is I try very, very hard to listen to all of those kinds of things, but I think that way our community grows and changes is the third element.
And what do you want the voters to remember about you when they go to cast their vote?
Well, I would hope they remember that I listen to everybody. I don't have an agenda. I try very, very hard not to have an agenda, a personal agenda. That doesn't mean that I don't have personal choices, but I try to listen to both sides of every argument and try to listen then to what comes before us in the city council from both the staff and from the citizenry, and then try to make a value judgment on what's best. And it's a kind of a rotary thing. But, is it beneficial to all concerned? And so the answer to that one is that's where I try to go, and I try to give it the best shot I can. I do my homework. I check with people. I listen, and I hope they take that away.
Well, thanks for taking the time to speak with Coronado, and good luck in the upcoming election.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.